This
It's not.
conference will now be recorded.
Uh, okay, it's noon. Welcome everybody to the Wednesday, March 2nd, 2022 meeting of the Monterey Select Board here in Town Hall. I'm Stephen Weiss, the chair.
Justin Mako, present.
Before we go into the items on the agenda, I'd like to make a general motion of support for the Ukrainian people. We're all watching what's going on over there. And as somebody who lived through 9/11, I know how awful it is to have somebody come and invade your home. So that's my motion. You willing to second that motion?
Yeah, I agree.
So yes, make an official motion of support for Ukrainian people. Thank you, Justin. Let's go on to the business at hand. Town administrator items, update on human resource proposals for handbook update.
So the Collins Center, the woman that I need to speak to was on vacation and just returned yesterday, so I haven't been able to get the second proposal, so if you can hold on one more week, that would be great, and I have it going on the finance committee agenda to see if they'll approve using those funds for this at their Tuesday meeting.
Okay, because I know that was mentioned last night, so, all right, so we'll put it on the next, thing. Update on the cell phone and personal email use policies from other towns.
So unfortunately, I have not gotten anything from the other towns, so if you don't mind, I can send the same email to council and see if they have a blanket one.
I think it would be good, I think, yeah, hopefully council has something, or maybe we could just go on other towns' websites and see.
Well, like the towns are saying they don't have any.
Oh, gotcha. Okay, I thought they just weren't responding, they're responding saying they don't have one. Because I think it is a good idea that we make our expectations clear in a concrete way. Of what exactly is expected, for people who don't have a town cell phone, or do have a town email, or don't. And how do we make sure that we, like John Levin said, maintain a record to protect ourselves if other towns. But I think it would be good for us to make it so that all the expectations are clear, and then also, like John said, expectations are clear that if someone isn't following it, you can say, here's this policy, and please follow it, and then,
My question is, didn't I see language of that in the, we had a select board policy paper?
You do have a current policy, I think I sent it to you all last week, that building inspector, myself, sergeant, police chief, and the town clerk are all supposed to be using town cell phones.
No, I understand about that, but the idea of maintaining email records for.
Well, that's in the public records law.
I think, so that's in the public records law, which is available to anyone. But I think rather than having each town employee and official read through and determine how they are going to retain their records, it'd be nice to say, and John Levin said that the ZBA always CCs the town administrator. But it'd be nice to say in a concrete way, if you're on the planning board and you're sending emails to places and you're inquiring about, the master plan, and you're using your personal email because you can't get signed on to the planning board account, but you CC the planning board email or something like that. I don't know the exact policy, but I think it would be good to have a concrete way, like John Levin said, so that the town is protected. And try to think through, whether it's emails or hard documents or text messages or whatever it may be. But, right now it's kind of up to every single person to figure out how they're gonna do that, and it'd be nice to have a policy that includes all records, right? I don't know.
Okay, so who's gonna, we'll ask, step one, we'll ask council, and if council doesn't have one, step two, we'll see if we can put something together. Okay, that sounds reasonable?
Yeah, I think maybe KT has something, maybe they don't.
Right, so
But-
so we're gonna reach out, to council and ask them. I'm waiting on their responses for a few things.
I did get and forwarded a response that I have related to our meeting today.
Okay, I didn't,
But-
I was here.
Steve,
But,
I wonder if it would be a good idea to have, if you use that system of them sending their email someplace to store it, but rather than that be coming in on the town administrator's computer, giving her an awful lot of stuff to open up and see that's not relevant, that to her job, that there might be a separate account, email account, town hall email account.
Well, I was thinking,
They can
that's
send-
kind of what I was getting at by saying, if it's a planning board item, but you're not the one with the email and password to the planning board account, and you gotta send an email, you just CC the planning board account. The only problem, there are potential problems, I don't think it's gonna be an easy thing to do. But, or maybe just like a records, email account or something like that. And we can see what other towns do, I guess they may not have a written policy, but how do they maintain records? Cause this is something,
yeah,
Every town deals with
I'm
I
surprised.
had a few answers on that, but I didn't compile them for today. Let me find out what town council has for,
Okay, good,
You'd
we'll
like
put that on the agenda.
a draft. And
Do you wanna put budget review, move budget review down, or, or do you wanna discuss it right now in order?
I'm fine moving it to the end.
Okay. So then let's see if we can get through the minutes of 2/23/22.
So my first edit was just clarifying the two financial components. The proposal for the winter fuel stipend is $250 monthly, an additional $100 per month per employee, additional $3,000 per year. The request for minimum call time is 4 hours, increased from the current 2 hours.
Okay, that's fine, and I just added that it was confirmed at all costs they came out of snow and ice, and I just, the word, then and Jim would not be requesting any additional funds at town meeting. Number two, Roberts, I guess you did. Oh,
I
Roberts,
just was clarifying what exactly the items were in.
fine, of the MMA Selectmen's Handbook, that's fine. I had written, it's helpful to adopt a new set of rules in the middle of budget, it would not be helpful to adopt a new set of rules in the middle of budget season with a select board that has only 10 meetings left, not a member, so I just got rid of member.
Gotcha.
And then Justin thinks, fine, you suggest rules of order from MMA Selectmen's Handbook would keep meetings early and on tap, that's fine. So this is something that was left out, but I think is an important point. Susan brought up this idea that she thought that it would prevent open meeting law complaints, and she was told that it would not prevent open meeting law complaints. So that's why I didn't omit it. Schedule, so see if they can be changed or abandoned.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, so, I know there was a lot of shouting back and forth, but, I did ask John for more specifics after he accused me of something or other, and then you, rightly said that we shouldn't be discussing this during the investigation. And that's why I made the motion, to table the discussion, because in the current minutes, it sounded like John said something and I tabled the motion, and I didn't want people to think that we're just shutting it down.
Can I just add, Steve, Justin stated that he was uneasy discussing the investigation in a public meeting.
It's fine. We're gonna initial yours, or yeah, we'll initial yours.
Either. So here, I just removed a direct quote and put town council opine that it is illegal for the town to make appointments without a finite term or end date for many positions, because I know that the, actual opinion will be, in the documents, the minutes, so if someone's curious, they could.
Well, I guess the thing is, this was actually read into the minutes.
Okay.
I guess the challenge is if something is read, like if town council gives an opinion and we read them into the minutes, then they should be, actually, for transparency's sake, then we should, what if they're read into the minutes, they actually become part of the language of the minutes.
I
Yeah.
think it's just that the document is discussed, it becomes, something that.
It wasn't actually a document, it was a decision. So it wasn't like, well, we're sending you this document to show you that you can do
But
this, you can do this. It was
in the
here are specific minutes.
In the documents, it says, council opinion on appointment terms. So my point just being that the minutes can be a summary, and if people wanna read the actual email, that will be posted as well for them to read. I mean, minutes don't have to be word for word, I think there's something to be said for keeping things as a summary, and then there's the attached document.
Oh, no, generally I agree. I think that these particular, I don't know, because he's actually referencing, an existing legal thing, I think it'd be more transparent if we left it in. The town council will find.
Will the document be posted with the minutes?
It will,
Yeah.
but I think in the past, when it's short like this, we have put in the actual quotes, and then if people wanna see the remainder of it, cause it's not the entire.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't the whole email either, right,
No, but it was read into record and that specific part was discussed, so I think it's germane to the conversation.
It's relevant information that.
Alright, I have nothing, I was just trying to make it more.
Believe me, it's almost like, you're playing my role and I'm playing your role, usually we're the complete opposite, but in this particular case,
So I'll just go back to draft. If that chats, I have nothing against putting it in. Does that make sense? Go back to when it was, it had the whole quote in there.
Oh, yeah. So in other words, you're keeping.
Instead of my summary.
Okay. All right, I changed, waiting on, I just wanted to be more specific, waiting on one additional proposal instead of one more. Town clerk, just acknowledge that none of the selectmen placed this request on the agenda for approval. Okay, took out the other thing, that's fine. Word was notes and failed to respond to the request, Steve asked for posted hours. Yeah, I took out, I just asked for posted out, what the posted hours are, I didn't say, so I took that out. Don Coburn, Official was made, Justin made the motion, that's fine. John second motion, appointment, John seconded the Justin motion and it was voted on, Justin yes and John yes. Don inquired. There's a lot about you here.
Strike all four-letter words.
Right. Steve then offered a modified version of the motion. Okay. Work and work is fine. Second motion, the motion, the vote on, Justin yes, the system. Vote listen to the meeting. So, well, actually, so we're gonna have to put in, so I know you took out approved 2-0, but we're gonna have, somewhere it's gonna have to say that John didn't vote on this. So it could either be approved 2-0, or you can put in the, you can say John Weingold did not vote on this motion and left the meeting at 6:53 PM, but it has to be.
Well, I mean, and part of the reason that I reworked this, just adding more names, is in the 10 lines above, John seconded Justin's motion, it was voted on, Justin yes, John yes. And then Justin seconded Steve's motions, and it was voted on, Justin yes, Steve yes. So, should we write, Steve did not vote on this motion, John did not vote on this motion?
Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, if you want to make it clearer, because people should have an understanding of how the voting went on, so that later on we don't get. Okay. Gestation, we're gonna have to do the job, going self-functioning appointments. Okay, fine. 4. Just stated that it was his understanding that appeals to the public records should be made to the state. Fine. If the request for appeals, if the request has not been filled. Also then, okay, so here's another, support.
So if we're going with, keeping the full quotes, then instead of summaries, we'll return this to original, right?
Yeah.
I had just summarized the quote. I
get it.
never get quoted, so.
I'll quote you more if you like.
Just let me know when you want to quote it.
Believe me, I don't wanna be quoted anymore. That'll wear off quickly if you're sitting at the board.
You just gotta bring me the writing so I can get it again.
Don't quote me. All right, so let's continue. Damages, Justin honored how this great accomplishment where he promotes the retention of town records within reality time and large number of towns like John Levin. And by the way, I added John Levin's last name to it only because, you know, there's when there's 2 Johns, I know they're spelled differently, but also John Levin spelled his first name like John Silver. I was just wanted to be, just so that people didn't get lost in the sea of Johns. So that's the only reason why I added his last name.
We should also add John Levin to the present remotely.
Oh. It wasn't on there?
Paula was on, but John, I was just thinking, cause sometimes it would actually appear to be, oh no, never mind, I'm mistaken. I was wrong. It is there.
I'm not gonna quote you. Okay, that's fine. Record retention policies, that's fine. With the other. fine. Again, I just added John Lemon's name. Number five, number 6 are fine. Number 7 is that they'll be invested and live in the proposed tax district. Yeah, so that's what I said. It wasn't, anyway, I want to be clear, it's not just a lake. It's agreed not to act on the issue, and the motion would be made to remove this item from the agenda. That's permanently, okay, remove this item, remove the item from the agenda. Appointment request application, just want to be CC'd on filled out forms submitted to the town. Filled out appointment request forms, right? Or do you want to be CC'd on, I thought because so it'd be
I just
specific,
didn't,
right?
I didn't write appointment request application just because it was right in the subject of that topic. So I thought it would be clear.
I don't know. I don't know if you want people to think that you will be CC'd on every single thing
Okay.
that's submitted to the town.
I can write,
I would just add it just for double clarity. Motion was made to try it. Motion was made to try it out. Oh, so the motion made so I get rid of the word it, to try out, select word receiving completed. So just,
Yeah.
I would remove the word it. You made a statement that the budget is a work in progress format, not bold. Oh, this is, I don't know.
I just unbolded it.
Okay. And I added, because I was talking about percentage increases being thrown around in public. And then we made the motion, which was omitted on the original.
Last one is just roll, it's just a typo. Right.
Oh, yes, definitely not a toll call. All right, so I'd like to make a motion to accept the minutes, of 2/23/22 as amended by, Justin and myself.
Second,
I vote yes,
yes.
so we're, can we, do you want to continue with number 4, the open meeting law complaints?
So, I had drafted this response to John Silbert. And I was hoping that, especially when I got an update from Brian Riley, that we would actually be able to approve more minutes than we have, and that this could be amended to reflect that, but it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case today.
What was can you tell me what the crux of the changes? I mean, basically the
So
idea.
basically, the idea from Brian Riley is, I said, if members can't agree on a set of minutes, have we done our due diligence by trying to approve minutes? And more or less, the answer was no. And he said, it sounded like maybe if we had an executive session and we started right away to try to agree on a set of draft minutes, and we just really couldn't come to agreement, that'd be one thing. But he didn't think that the state would be sympathetic to not approving minutes for a period of months and then trying to do it and then not coming to agreement. So he strongly recommended, and I forwarded this to right before the meeting, to everybody on the select board and Melissa. Did you get it, Melissa? Cause I was doing it on my phone and it said like sending, and so maybe it didn't. There's a small chance it didn't, but I tried to.
So this letter
So this letter is more or less fine. I mean, it's just the truth of the situation.
Right.
But the problem is that we are not really covered by the fact that we tried to approve a set of minutes.
So if we get to the end of this session, on the agenda is the ability to go into executive session to flesh out the particulars, more formally. But right now, I'm just interested in this letter.
Well, so this letter I drafted before I had heard from Attorney Riley, and I had drafted assuming that we were covered by trying to approve minutes and having our own draft, which at the end of the day, if you can't come to an agreement, you can't come to an agreement. It just doesn't sound like, it sounds like he is advising us to really try to come to an agreement. If it didn't send, it just,
I didn't get it.
yeah, it said like sending and it wouldn't, and I have no clue why it wouldn't
Okay.
send, but it should.
So this first letter here does reflect the fact that the executive session minutes of 10:4 and 2:23:22 are not yet approved. So, and also the idea that we were, the understanding, which is 100% true, that, or at least I was under the understanding that executive session minutes that was under investigation, you couldn't even talk about that, and then I found out that was not the case. So we went ahead and did approve the executive sessions of 7:21 and 11:17 and 2:22 or 2:2, and 11:4 and 2:16. So we're making, so that's what this letter just states.
Yeah, I
basically.
mean, this is the truth.
Yeah,
Right,
it's
I
100%
just think
true.
when I heard from Attorney Riley, the truth is not good, which doesn't mean, like, we have to be truthful to what the situation is, but we have not covered ourselves by trying to approve minutes.
No one's covering themselves, everybody's trying to be 100% truthful.
No, I mean,
These
like,
are-
we have to,
These are, we're none of, you and I are both not attorneys, and, we try to, I understand that there was there was a previous board, the board that I was not on, had a disagreement about certain minutes. Is that true? Do you ever disagree on minutes and?
But you guys are in agreement with this letter, right?
Right.
So you just need to vote.
yeah, so frankly, I was hoping that we would, at the end of the meeting, enter executive session, say we will come back into open meeting after the executive session to try and rework this letter to include the results of the executive session. That's what I was hoping, because
Okay,
as
so,
it
all right,
stands,
so
we're
let's,
out of compliance.
okay, so
according-
let's table this discussion and see what happens.
Isn't it part of executive
I don't
session?
think he's gonna approve them, because he's gonna read his.
I
statement again.
know, and so I was hoping that attendance would be different and that we would be able to, because what I heard from attorney, like I said, I drafted this and unfortunately didn't send from the stupid phone. But what I heard from Attorney Riley was, you aren't really covered by saying, well, we tried to and we couldn't agree.
I understand, but are they recorded? Do we have a recording? Does she have a recording of those minutes? Of that meeting?
Yes, we have a recording.
So, and you've listened to the recording and still can't agree as to what it says? I don't understand that.
Yeah, I mean, we haven't been able to approve the minutes and,
Well, you could make the minutes the entire recording. Have them printed out. Then you can approve that.
That's separate from this. Are you guys gonna approve this letter?
Yeah, so Justin believes that
No, he doesn't
this
believe
letter
it.
may be,
He doesn't believe that anymore, because you're gonna read your statement about the one, and it's not gonna apply.
well, listen, let's hold off on this until the end. Let's just continue with the rest of the items on the agenda, right? And Review February 24th Transportation Committee report. So, Transfer Station Committee report. So we received, so the Transfer Station Committee had its first meeting, and it came up with some written recommendations to the Monterey Select Board, the text of which will be available to the public. We won't read those into the minutes. I guess the key points are that the Transfer Station Committee is suggesting the transportation best served by continuing to staff the transfer station with 2 part-time employees, although they recognize this may be difficult to achieve. They also recommend that the Monterey Select Board post 2 jobs, each up to 18 hours a week, with a wage of $20 per hour. They are going to work on a proposed posting to advertise. They do recognize, let's see. They do recognize that 20 hours a week, $20 an hour there may be some pushback from employees that are earning less, I'm assuming. They do suggest that the Select Board and the Finance Committee examine the hourly wages of all town employees. All right. The only other point that I see, so the committee, again, they reiterate that the recruitment effort is going to be difficult and may not be successful. So they are realistic. This is a tough environment to hire for this particular job. We got lucky with Beth and Dave and the gentleman's currently working. I always forget his name, sorry. Bill. Sorry, Bill. They also suggest the select board consider establishing a swap shop committee. See if they can possibly have somebody to staff people to staff the swap shop. I'm assuming they're talking about volunteers. So those are the suggestions, Justin. Did I get all the points?
Yes. So the immediate thing is to post 2 jobs up to 18 hours a week with a wage of $20 an hour.
Well, so 20. So what are the transportation?
2055.
So part-time. So they're offering and those are full-time. Those are full-time. Those are part-time positions. So they're actually asking that we post the job for less.
5 cents less, yes.
Was there any explanation that's not written in here? Why we?
There was just a lot of discussion about the parity between the positions here and paying transfer station staff almost equal to what part-time police officers are making and the highway department that have licenses. And so it was agreed after quite a bit of discussion that $20 was fair for now, to see what kind of applicants they get.
Okay, well, I have no problem attempting to get part-time folks to work at the transfer station for $20 an hour. Again, as the committee recognizes, it sounds like it's gonna be a difficult thing, but.
They recognize that getting 2 part-time people might be difficult.
I personally think that at least one of the people should be a full-time employee, but that's my own personal, of course you would have to pay benefits. But if we can get 2 part-time people, again, they're basically asking us to try to be as lucky as we were when we first staffed up the transfer station. I don't know, feeling lucky? I'm gonna try
If
it.
it is going to be difficult to find two part-time positions. And we have budgeted, do we have budgeted for 2055 for two positions?
For the current year, yes.
Yeah.
So they want you to accept this recommendation right now so we can get the help wanted ads out.
Right.
This week, we're
Time is of
meeting
the
again on
essence.
Friday, and then if we don't get anybody, applying within the next 2 weeks or so, then I think they might revisit and come back to you.
So that would be my recommendation.
Mhm.
Let's put it out there. Let's give it, I give it 3 weeks. No, I give it a little bit longer, give it a month, basically to see if, when we get that. And then that would be my motion.
Mhm.
To accept their recommendations, to post the job for 2 part-timers at $20 an hour, to give it, post the job for a month. However, if we do receive applicants, that we immediately, we don't, we can still talk, we can still interview them during the month period, don't we? Can't we? Or no?
Right, Jim and I will do interviews with anybody that is interested as soon as we get them.
So that would be my motion.
Second.
Okay, I vote yes.
Yes.
And, I'd like to say that, I appreciate the job of the transportation committee, and I was not in favor of it, but I changed my mind. I think they're doing a reasonably good job, so, thank you.
I have two other questions
Sure.
related to the report. They asked the select board to consider establishing a permanent swap shop committee. Would this be conditional on how the search goes? Or,
No, so at this moment, they're looking for like the auxiliary committee, I think like Virgil Stucker and his wife, and there was a few people online that said that they would be interested in running the swap shack and coming up with the schedule and stuff. That was what it was about, but I do have a possible staffing solution that I'm gonna bring up at their meeting on Friday.
Okay,
So,
so can we just put it on the agenda for next week then?
yeah, I don't think that's super urgent at the moment.
okay. And the other request they made, other than consider a swap shop committee, would be, we respectfully suggest that the select board and finance committee examine the hourly wages of all town employees due to our concern that some of the wages may no longer be competitive in the current labor market.
So generally, we always do that, especially when somebody leaves and we're going out to the market. The first thing that the town administrator does is do a search about what other towns are offering. It would be, so I believe that's currently being done. If the idea is to kind of do an audit of everybody who's currently in a position. It would only make sense if you're gonna make a major shift. If somebody's working for $18 an hour and you find out that other towns are paying $17 an hour, there's no way we're gonna say, hey, by the way, we did an audit, you need to be $17 an hour, we'll lose that, right?
No,
So-
so you wouldn't cut, but you could potentially make increases to make sure that you keep that position filled with, and make it a competitive position, right?
So I am working on that, and just so you know, Jim and I will be making some recommendations for the highway at the joint meeting next Wednesday. We already reviewed the impact of this, in conjunction with that, and I haven't talked to the police chief yet to see if he has any recommendations, but those would be the two major departments that are affected. And
Yeah,
I'm
usually people are
continuing
not-
to get
Yeah.
updated information for my salary surveys.
Yeah, so I would say that, let's, it's okay to exploratory, I don't think anything formal needs to be established. Because, again, there are towns, we've done this with the various parties, there are towns that pay more than us, and there are towns that pay less than us, always the case. And so, generally the philosophy has been, and we have a former selectman sitting here, is that we don't want to be, we don't wanna pay the most, but we don't wanna pay, we don't wanna pay the least. We wanna offer a fair and reasonable wage, for the, for the employees.
Mhm.
So, certainly any employee that feels that they're, that they need more funds, so far they have not been shy in making that request. I mean, if the finance committee would like to, anyway, another reason why it's always good to talk to the town employees, Justin. Believe me, but if they feel that they're being underpaid, they will tell you.
I guess the one time we don't hear it is if we're trying to hire and we're not getting, people, then we don't necessarily know exactly why. But I guess maybe it's worth figuring out why exactly the transfer station committee made the recommendation explicitly that the select board and finance committee examine the hourly wages of all town employees.
So because the conversation came up, about, they originally were talking about offering $25 an hour to the transfer station, and there was a large heated discussion about how that would be more than what the highway and the part-time police officers were paid. So when they finally came down to 20, they did say that we may need to go up above 20, but that also means, even with the 20, that we should evaluate those two departments and other ones as well to make sure that the parity of positions and everything is on par with other towns. So I did talk to Susan a little separately, and she's aware that I do a survey and that I'm updating the information.
Did
They just wanted to make sure that you acknowledged that there are other departments that may get their feathers ruffled a little bit.
Yeah.
Because their wages are not much more, and they have a lot more requirements and licenses
And this is what
drug testing and.
we've faced this in the past. So this is, this is not new. We did have you done a survey of other transfer stations?
Yes. We're, I think, the second highest paid one.
In South County or?
For my towns that answered, yeah.
Gotcha.
Well,
Which is all across the state in theory?
No, when I do my survey for that, I keep it to this area so that it's,
Okay.
we're not being compared to Boston, I mean, they're.
and we try to keep, the comps, you wanna keep you wanna first do the analysis of towns that are closest to us in population. The bigger the town is, the more resources they have, but the bigger their transfer stations are. And, people, so
It's also who we're competing with for employees, We may not be comparable in size and budgets and stuff to Great Barrington, but because they start a highway worker off, I think at $23 or $25 an hour, which is more than I think Highway 2 makes. So if we're looking to fill that position and they can go, be the lowest man on the totem pole and make more than they can here with more responsibilities, where are you gonna choose? That's the problem that we find, like right now, Stockbridge is hiring a foreman for the DPW and they're starting at $30 an hour. Ours is 26, I believe, off the top of my head. So, if, it's hard to compete with the towns around here.
Okay, So we'll continue the conversation. This is a very good thing to sit in with the town administrator and Justin and have direct conversations about. Okay, number 7, review February 24th correspondence from the Lake Garfield Working Group request for $50,000 for special article for the continuing efforts of lake research and milfoil mitigation. For the public's adoration, the select board placed me on the Lake Garfield Working Group many years ago. I have specifically not attended or participated in any meetings discussing this amount, since there seems to be an atmosphere of gotcha out there. So any request or letter that came from the Lake Garfield Working Group, I had no participation in. But since it's written to you, Justin, you can read it out to the public.
Hello, Justin. In the last Lake Garfield Working Group meeting, it was moved and approved that we request the Select Board and Finance Committee approve the amount of $50,000 to be budgeted for the continuing efforts of lake research and milfoil mitigation. Please let me know if you need any more information or protocol to forward this request. Thank you, Steve Snyder, Lake Garfield Working Group Chairman.
You're paying for it.
You almost doubled the amount of money you spent the year before, and you don't even explain why you're doing that? It's a little mind-boggling.
So, it is a huge increase from what the town has been appropriating for milfoil.
So
I have listened to a few of the meetings and been shared with some of the documents. It's my understanding that the diver assisted suction harvesting, which is what all the money's been going towards, was being successful, at least at containing the milfoil invasion, but that this survey in particular this year, it was discovered that it is not as successful as it had been for some time. And that the lake scientists recommended, in addition to the suction harvesting, also using a mechanical harvesting of the top of the plants and a few other methods in addition to the diver assisted suction harvesting. So I was actually not at the Lake Garfield Working Group meeting when they approved the amount of $50,000, because I believe it was during the select board meeting. But I don't know. When John Silbert went over the history of these requests over the years, it sounded like frequently they are not approved by the select board or the finance committee, and then they become a citizen petition. But at the same time, I'm wondering if we have a Lake Garfield Working Group specifically to advise us on how to deal with Lake Garfield, and we're not taking the recommendations. Obviously, this doesn't have a lot of, or any backup behind it, but should we respond and say, can you please explain why? Or could they come to a meeting with the select board? I just wonder the purpose of having a Lake Garfield Working Group if we don't take their advice or at all, you know? Because I think the lake is important, but we need to know more about why this specific number is being requested.
So I agree with you 100%. I don't understand why they wouldn't, right, because my first question when I saw that was, how they come up with that number? I mean, I know that in the past, that they, I think it's New England Aquatics has been generally the high bidder or sometimes the only bidder. It's constantly been $25,000 or $30,000 for everything. And so when I saw this, my first question is, how'd you get there? Is is it more milfoil, is it a different method, is it something else? So I would, request, that, somebody from the Lake Garfield Working Group, yeah, if they're interested, to come to an open meeting and explain to us what that's for. Yeah, I think it's perfectly reasonable.
I don't know if you were at the meeting last night, Justin, but I just probably should be noted that the finance committee unanimously denied the request and put in 0 for fiscal year 23.
And then it also came up during the joint meeting, right? Or did it not?
The last night, the
Yeah, last night at the drum, I didn't know if you were on last night, I didn't see your name on there, but it came up last night, you,
Yeah, I was there, he was there.
you was? Oh, yes, you were, because.
He was right next, he was in town hall, he was right next
That's
to.
right, because John was saying, what do you think?
Right,
So,
but that doesn't,
yeah,
I
I
But it doesn't
thought,
mean you can't put it on, I just wanted to make sure you,
and then it would just say finance committee does not approve,
right,
right?
yeah, if,
Um,
you know, the select board and finance committee don't have to agree on everything. If there is something that we disagree on, that we'll state it in the warrant, select board agrees, the finance committee doesn't agree. That's the way it's been done, but this is not really
So-
talking about the number, it's talking about how did you get to the number.
And so they did, or Steve did say, please let me know if you need any more information.
Okay.
Or protocol to forward this request, so I think it would make sense to respond, yes, we do want more information. And does it make sense for them to write up reasons why they are asking for this amount of money? Or just to come to a meeting and explain?
Well, if they can come to a meeting,
let's ask for it in writing first. I'm just thinking of the parties involved, and it might be clearer if it's written out.
fine.
I can contact. the
Well,
legal
after
firm.
her in writing, but say if you'd like to
And
come to the next session, we'll.
And
Well-
they should supply you with the reports that they have.
So I have been supplied with the reports and I can, but frankly, the reports don't say, here's our estimate for next year. They just say, what has been done to the lake and what the persistent problems, and then they mentioned other forms of, milfoil prevention beyond dash.
Right.
And if I recall, I don't think they say we could use $50,000 next year and here's why. So I think that, my understanding is that was something that the Lake Garfield Working Group came up with, but we need to know more about why and how they came up with it, and then we can decide whether or not we wanna put it on the warrant.
And the thing about milfoil is that, it's my understanding, is that, you can throw, you can put $10,000 towards it, you can put $100,000 towards it. It depends on, because it's basically, the more money you spend, the more the more control you get. So it's not in itself a fixed sum. You'll never win the war on milfoil, but that's not the reasoning behind Dash. It's just to keep it at bay. So yeah, but you mentioned these other methods, which I had no idea since I haven't attended the meetings recently.
My only question is, I would imagine, just based on history, that if the select board doesn't wanna put it on the warrant, there might be interest in a citizen's petition, because that's been done in the past. And so if those are due 3 weeks from today, 1, 2, 3, then it might be helpful for us to decide sooner than later whether or not we wanna put on the warrant as select board. And so hopefully we could do some.
So good, so we'll hopefully you'll get the information back before our next meeting. Then we will have a more informed discussion about it, and we will decide at that point, what the board's position is.
You know, can I say one thing?
Sure.
Last year, the year before, I can't remember which, same situation arose. you mentioned, I think, the other night. And we put it on the warrant, noting that both boards were opposed to it at that time. And we did that, that was actually my motion, I think. We did it because we just said, look, why, we know they're gonna do it anyway. Why put them to the trouble of running around and getting signatures when they've done it every time they had to? Let's just put it on, note to the public that both boards disagree with it, or that one board agrees and the other one disagrees, whatever that is. And it goes before the town where, frankly, without having any knowledge, solid scientific knowledge of why they're doing it, they vote for it.
Yeah, but was that, I think it was 2 years ago.
No,
So,
you know,
It sounds like it's been voted yes every time.
Yeah.
Town meeting, yeah.
well, I can't remember when it was ever denied. But, is it ever denied, Melissa?
I don't think so.
It was never denied.
It's a
You
link.
say lake and everybody says, yay.
No, you don't, oh, all right, I won't get into the specifics of it, because I
So
make
what-
the same speech every year.
So where we are leaving this is that Melissa will reach out to the Lake Garfield Working Group and request reasoning behind the figure. And when they provide that in writing, of course, they'd be welcome to come to the select board meeting.
Absolutely, you can include that also.
While we discuss it.
And again, the select board can approve it, but not at the $50,000 level, you know, we can approve it at the $30,000 level, as it's always been in the past, you can approve it at any level. This is a recommendation from them, but we'll talk to them, hopefully we'll get some information next meeting. Number 8, consider appointing a salary commission. So I know this is not mine.
Okay, so just in response to the transfer station committee's recommendation that the select board and finance committee examine hourly wages of all town employees due to our concern that some of those wages may no longer be competitive in the current labor market. They're asking the select board and the finance committee to do it. It sounds like they may not have been aware that the town administrator is compiling a survey. My thought on the topic was get a few people together to write up a report, and that way, you know, it's not the select board and the finance committee doing it, but,
The challenge with the salary commission is, and when I first got on here, there was an employee,
Employee compensation committee.
right, there was an employee compensation committee. The problem with compensation committees generally, especially in a small town, is that there's always gonna be people that are part of, related to, or friendly with people who are receiving compensation from the town. It's very difficult to get, and everybody feels that they deserve to be paid more. I certainly do. So in a small town, to find people who are really neutral, who's not going, who, would be next to impossible. And generally, and so the concern is, then you get people lobbying for, you know, well, I love the people at the library, so I think they should be paid more. I love the people at transportation, I think they should be paid more. Or I love, you know, the police really helped me out the other day, you guys are underpaying them. And then, you know, we'd love to, oh, look at this, boy, we mentioned Steve Snyder, he shows up. Steve. So, come on in, we want to talk to you, anyway,
Is this hotbed of contentment and cooperation?
for the moment. So Justin, so do you understand where I'm coming from here? It's.
I understand, my point of view is that, putting together a salary commission of, if we could find, people who were unrelated to the, individual employees could actually be more impartial than having the select board do it, because the select board is constantly working with different employees, and there's certainly an appearance, of, like you said, that person knows this person, that's why they're asking them to get paid more and not this person. And I thought if you could get together a salary commission of people who we were confident would not be partial on those items, then that would be the best way to do it. But,
Think, do me a favor, there's one other reason, but, think about, just think in your mind of who you would like, who you could see on the commission. And then just run, one or two people from that. So like, I really, I'm not saying that people are easily swayed or whatever, but people feel committed, when it comes to compensation, people feel committed to improving their situation or improving the situation of people that they respect or they like. And then you also have the added concern that, he's putting on the glove. Oh, so he's not gonna,
Sap season, syrup.
Who's here for something else?
can you speak to us briefly about the Lake Garfield Working Group for Cross?
Yeah.
If you have a minute.
That works.
okay, so, all right, let's stop this conversation and just switch over to Steve,
Yeah.
You can sit down if you like, I don't want.
That's all right, yeah.
Um,
I gotta get back to work, so.
Okay, sorry, well, maybe we'll make this fast. Can you, we received a request from the Lake Garfield Working Group for $50,000.
Yeah.
Can you, can you tell us why, the request is $20,000 more than the Lake Garfield Working Group usually makes?
So, I can go back and look at the minutes. It has to do with, the report from, both, the lake scientist and the New England Aquatics that was suggesting a possible, additional approach. So, without knowing, without sitting together and actually being able to price out something, that's my impression, that it was just like a global fee. So, I mean, in terms of, select board and finance committee, I guess the question would be, I don't know how that works, if it's like a discussion, in the past, the LGWG hasn't, I don't think it's ever even been put on the warrant, outside of a citizen's petition.
John remembers that we actually did it once, but it said the select board did
Was
not
it?
accept it, and the finance committee did not accept it, but
Yeah.
it's still on the warrant.
Okay, yeah, so, but yeah, it seems like a good question, I'm sorry, I can't say, because, well, the other thing is part of that is we realized that the 30,000 as it was dispersed, and will be, the problem is bigger than what we can do in terms of the driver assistant suction harvesting. So it was judged that it's really not, controlling it as much as would be ideal or better or whatever. It's just, it grew more than this last year than what the dash was able to accomplish. That's the main reason.
So it was more about,
There was patches just left undone because couldn't get to it and not anticipating be able to do what would be desirable with the 30,000. I'd have to look and see how much was dispersed and, whether, I don't even know offhand whether we used that 30,000 all or if there's some left over for the spring before we go into the next year.
Right.
Before we go into the 22-23.
There's money.
there's money left over, right?
There was money left over last year too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
usually it's left over because we're looking to do a spring
Right.
dash again, but I think that would be safe to say that was the primary reason for more, because I remember quite a bit of discussion about from the survey that there was more milfoil than than the 30,000 was anticipated to be able to handle.
I did realize I had a couple of quotes that I had pulled from the documents. In the fall of 2021, both the New England Aquatic Services letter, report said that what they had been doing seemed promising and was working well. But then, Ken Wagner, in an October 22nd, 2021 memo said, our inability to gain control over those deeper growths after 5 years of effort suggests that more and likely different effort is needed. So and then he mentioned the mechanical harvesting and placing mats.
Yeah, the benthic barrier, mechanical harvesting.
Mechanical harvesting?
Well, it's just New England Aquatics is going in that direction. They're acquiring a machine to do it. And the idea there was that machine would be able to reach down to a certain depth, and that the dash would be more effective if they went over a patch with that and then followed it up with the dash after the machine.
Okay.
And it wouldn't be, it's there. New England Aquatics is just suggesting that.
Right.
Because they're gonna own the machine. And so, that they're gonna use in their work where they do around other lakes, so that's all a combination of the increased, amount, but, like we all realize it's whatever it is, a political call or whatever, whether the town feels that they can afford that, so.
I mean, I explained it,
Yeah.
you're not gonna win the battle, you're not gonna win the war, you're just trying to win the.
Yeah, it's the
individual
same
battles.
controversy that's been going on, and whether to do something or to do nothing.
Right.
And some people, and it's somewhat of a difficult decision to make. You can kind of do all the research you want and probably still vote.
Right.
Different ways,
Um,
so.
And also, a lot of this seems to stem from the town's opposition to herbicides, because Ken Wagner wrote the stance of the town of Monterey against herbicide use in Lake Garfield, despite such use in other lakes in the region and even within Monterey, is not logical and is costing both the town and the Friends of Lake Garfield a lot of money for very little return. So,
I know from discussions with that gentleman that, yes, this whole approach to milfoil management, came from the town's opposition to the use of herbicides. There are plenty of, there are many lakes that do use herbicides, but the fact that you use herbicides, by the way, also doesn't win the war. So you're just, there's no, with the exception of filling in the lake, there's no way to end the war, to win the war on milfoil. The idea is whether how many battles you wanna fight and how expensive it is.
Yeah, well, there is one smallish lake out in Washington that they were able to eradicate, but it's kind of an outlier to the whole.
I would bet any amount of money that it'll come back, cause it's fed by
So,
seeds from birds.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
yeah, that's all, and so on the herbicide issue, there is a new herbicide again, recent that I understood, that came up in the discussion that maybe thanks for those notes, that's actually hitting it right on the head. It's coming back to me now as you read that. That would be a potential one if anybody wanted to do it, but given the past experience with even mentioning the name herbicide in town, it's like nobody feels like even bringing that up. Not, just within the LGWG. It's like, we could say it, but we feel, my understanding of LGWG is just a committee to advise the select board.
That's exactly what it is.
Yeah, and so that's our working group, and so we could say, this is the herbicide, we recommend it on the basis, take a vote, say on the basis of X, Y, and Z, and then that would give the select board but then it's an issue with the DEP. I mean, the FLG, is my understanding, could also, in Stockbridge, we've seen what happened in Stockbridge. This is all over the place between courts. I don't know what the final settlement was in Stockbridge, but with the local jurisdiction versus DEP versus herbicide versus no herbicide. And so, I'm agnostic.
I thought, Steve, what happened in Stockbridge is they decided to use herbicide, and then all the milfoil went away naturally, so they decided not to do it.
Well, there's several bays in Stockbridge, is the point. There's a lake association, and then there's the residents, and then I'd have to look up the articles again, but it was batted around like ping pong between different, and it went to court, actually. And then there was even the DEP, at the state level, was coming back and, in court, from what I understood, and telling the local jurisdiction that they were out of line, and then that was being contested, and so, from my understanding.
Yeah, and a part of the consistent request for, at least in the past, for $30,000 for milfoil control also was an effort to basically, come up with a policy for the town that is not going to include lawsuits and whatever.
Exactly.
And, because people are passionate on both sides, and the idea was come up with approach it in that fashion. Some years you do better, some years you don't do better, some years they die, milfoil does die off on its own, some years it comes back with a vengeance. So, so you take all of that and you apply a consistent policy, we're gonna do as best as we can.
Yeah.
And, I mean, all the money does go into diversity and suction harvesting, it's not wasted.
Yeah.
And then it keeps the approach in the town consistent, again, so that it doesn't become its own issue, like Stockbridge.
Yeah. And personally, I mean, being a member of it, I'm agnostic on the whole thing. If the town decided they just couldn't do it, even a citizen petition didn't pass, there wasn't enough people to think it was worth the price, and we just let it go and did what some people are advocating and do an experiment. I can't say for sure what that looked like. We know there are other lakes that wish they didn't do that after the fact. So, but every lake's its own, every lake's its own lake, so, you know.
Herbicides themselves are not free, so you still cost $15,000.
Yeah.
It's my understanding of the application, even if for some reason everybody said, no, we don't wanna do it.
Yeah.
So it's not, you know, it's a method, and it's also, or you don't do anything, right?
Yeah.
And then you're in then you become
Yeah, I mean,
Stockbridge.
and then you look at Lake Buell, that's again, apples and oranges, but you know, that I can understand, what I'm saying is personally, I can understand all the arguments. I can understand the one as well on the other side that says, it would say $50,000 is cheap for what the lake means and affords to the town, and for what is a reasonable assessment of the effectiveness of what we're doing against milfoil. And but other people might cry, it's way too much for what we're getting for it. So I have no answer to that.
Yeah,
It's just, that's why we have town meeting, right?
that's exactly it.
Yeah.
That's exactly
But I
it.
think but to the specific question about the 50,000, it's just like you read from Ken's report. It's not, it's felt like that's basically where that figure came from, is that we're, recognizing what Ken's saying about the 30,000, we need to step it up. So, for those that think that that's, that's a good effort. And I don't know if we'll ever have the exact answer on that. It's a little bit like putting salt, it's heuristic, a little like salt on the road, salt and sand versus liabilities and accidents. I mean.
Actually, that's a very good analogy. You're better than I am in analogy. That's it, right, you're gonna pay every year, you're gonna need to spend that amount of money. And if you decide one year, I don't wanna spend that amount of money, you don't have to, but there are other consequences.
That are unknown. I mean, it's not something you can just, an equation, you can just plug in the numbers and have an answer.
Right. Maybe they will come up with those carps eventually.
Carrots,
Carp,
yeah, oh,
but
yeah,
the problem is the carp, they eat everything.
Yeah.
And once they finish the milfoil.
so, we
Well,
should,
okay, so is that do you need more information? I can understand. So in my mind, approximately, so in my mind, it's still diversity suction harvesting, but then the other $20,000 consists of, I don't know.
Well, I do have a couple of things that I could add, to the understanding. So New England Aquatic Services, who does the dash, said before next season, we plan to have a small aquatic weed harvester that will have the capability to cut weeds at a depth of 5.5 feet. So essentially they go, ahead and cut it down 5.5 feet and then come back and do dash. And supposedly it would make it more efficient. But then from Ken, so I think that's probably part of the reason for the increased request. But then from Ken, he mentioned the new herbicide Prosolacer, which is now approved for use in Massachusetts. Reports of excellent milfoil control with minimal impact to non-target species are very encouraging. But then he said, if a manual control program is to continue without the aid of herbicides, I suggest that it include application of benthic barriers.
Right.
So the lake,
Say that last part again.
he said, if we're going to continue without the aid of herbicides, he suggests that it include application of benthic barriers.
They're
Which are
rubber,
these
they're
mats?
mats that you put on the
Oh.
ground, you smother the milfoil, you also smother everything else that's under, that's on the floor in that location.
So my understanding, and I wasn't at the most recent Lake Garfield working group meeting, but my understanding is that the lake scientist is saying either the efficient way to do it is with herbicides, and if you're not gonna do herbicides, the dash is not sufficient, and you should consider placing mats and doing the top harvesting before dash, so.
yeah, that's right, I mean, we went over that, that was the reason, is because dash is fairly expensive to clean all the weeds, so if you had these mats of weeds where you could get down, I was thinking 6 feet, but 5.5 feet, whatever, and clear that mat out, then you have a lot less, and that's fast and quick compared to having the divers pull it, so.
And nobody brought up I thought that if you do mechanical harvesting, that it actually spreads the milfoil.
Well, I think we'd have to know how that machine is working.
Because that's what happened to Buell.
They might not even, at some points, they might not be, two things. We don't know how it works, if it's also we'd have to see what their machine is that they're getting versus, because it conceivably could suck everything up as well as they're going along, but who knows?
Or they just wanna try out their machine on somebody's lake.
Well, they do this all over the place. They're not dependent on Lake Garfield business, though. That's all. It's tricky. It's tricky.
Yeah, no, we explained it, you can spend $10,000 on it, you can spend $100,000 on it, you can spend $1 million on it.
Yeah, and the question is to know what that.
Right.
And I understand, like, I'm basically also on the side of the finance committee. If my job was to hold the purse strings, and that was my job, and that was the lens I was looking at everything through, I would just hold the purse strings. And say, no, I'm not gonna pay for anything, lower the taxes. But, that's, all I'm saying is, that's just a different way of looking at the issue.
There's always different ways to look at the
Yeah.
issue. I mean, again, if something's been basically working, I'm always in favor of keeping it going and modifying it if we need to modify it.
Yeah, and I'm on that side, and also realize, as I've said in town meeting, I don't pay taxes belonging to the Gould Farm. I think we still make a contribution to town, whatever, but so I kind of hate to ask people to ante up for something. Although I would pay for my share of suction harvesting, whatever. And I use the lake a lot, so I wouldn't like to see it just go to people are already, we know the complaints we hear from people that use the lake, but about can
Yeah,
you
but-
swim and how bad it is. And so,
It's pointless, the point is that we pay for, I pay for them to salt and sand, Ferry Road, I don't live on Ferry Road, but I understand it's part of the town and I pay for it. If you don't.
Yeah.
Use a lake, but
Yeah,
you participated in it as well,
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
that's a lot. Anyway, Steve, thank you
Yeah.
sorry for us,
no, that's all right.
here.
I wouldn't have interrupted, thanks.
I just wanted to know what the,
Yeah.
What the giant, this has always been 30, 30, 30, 30, 30, and then all of a sudden it's like,
Yeah, and it's that, just what, we went over that in the meeting as Justin read, yeah. So.
Okay.
Thanks,
all right, thank you.
thanks.
Bye.
That's the one guy I put on the salary commission. So listen, well, I don't know, you want, what do you want to do? You want to continue this discussion of this special article over here?
I wouldn't mind, and I read some quotes from the reports as to why what we're doing right now isn't sufficient. But I wouldn't mind pressing the Lake Garfield Working Group for, what are you going to do? Or what are we going to do with this $50,000? Is 30,000 gonna go to Dash, 10,000 to barriers, and what's the money going towards? I think, it's clear that the Dash has its limitations and isn't the most efficient way to do it, but it kind of keeps everyone somewhat happy. But I wouldn't mind asking them for more detail as to what that number's about. I mean,
Okay.
what exactly?
So that's, I think that's a great idea. Ask them for a breakdown. What goes to pay for what? So, anyway, the other reason why I'm not for a salary commission is the following. Is that, I still believe that we are going to get human resource person in here for this thing. And part of the human resource department's job is to finally do employee reviews and recommendations. So, and I'm confident that that is gonna happen sooner than later. I mean, this group is really working hard, so, and so that would negate, the efforts of a salary commission, because you'd have a human resource person there, who'd be doing us two things. It'd be doing the research on essentially what somebody's being, what they're being paid, what that position is being paid, and also on how their individual jobs and job performance is going to be looked at. So we will actually be away from this idea of, well, right, Egremont pays their transportation person $20 an hour, so we should do it. Once we have an HR person in there, they're gonna be able to give us a little bit more of a specific thing. So, it's those two reasons. It's small town, very difficult, and are there any towns that of our size that do have these types of commissions?
I don't know. I can look it up.
So, I mean,
It sounds like when you started, there was an employee compensation.
right, there was an employee compensation commission, which I, to tell you the truth, I never really understood, because you had employees talking about making recommendations about their own pay. I was kind of baffled at the idea. In theory, I can understand how, obviously everybody wants to have a discussion about their own pay, but I never quite I never really understood why, like what, people talking about their own salaries, or people who work together talking about, well, you make this, I make this. I don't know, it just didn't seem, it was ultimately disbanded because, it was ultimately disbanded because I don't think that it actually achieved its purpose, that a lot of people were upset. But again, that was when I first got on the board. Didn't, and it kind of, I don't even think it was voted out. I think it just kind of.
Didn't get reappointed, yeah.
It just didn't get reappointed.
Yeah,
So,
I mean, and the idea behind, you'd have to find the right people, but the idea behind it would be you find people who, like Steve, can see, different sides of paying employees properly and appropriately and competitively, and making sure that we're also representing the taxpayer and just finding that middle ground, I guess. If, like you said, with an HR person on the way, and they'll take care of some of that. I just, in response to the recommendation of the transfer station committee, I thought it was worth a consideration.
well, we're doing I mean, we are following their recommendation of the transportation committee, right? We are doing an analysis of what that position pays in other places. And, although you see by the recommendation, it proves that it's a very inact science, because right now they're actually making a recommendation to pay people less than what they're currently paying.
Yeah.
So do you think you're gonna get a better person for less? But it's counterintuitive. However, the reason why why the person is paying, we are paying more is because we need them more. So it's not an exact science, it's supply and demand. And so any commission can say, well, we should pay all part-time police officers $27.50 an hour. That's great. But if there are lots of applicants there, and you want to, then you could probably get a good one for less. If there are no applicants there, then we would have to pay more. And so it becomes, it's relative to lots of different things.
Yeah.
That's why I'm looking forward to having an HR person who'll probably come after Owen on it.
Probably the most important thing, one of the most important things to employees is salary. And more important than just salary amount is fairness in comparing various jobs. And it seems to me that you ought to not resist appointing a commission, because it will be difficult to find people who can be objective. I think you can set that as a goal and find people who are objective. And it's something which, instead of getting a little bit of time from you, a little bit of time from Melissa, it's something where you have a group of citizens concentrating on all the problems that relate to salaries in the town. And I don't see how you can do anything but benefit from getting additional study and additional recommendations. I don't understand why you want to assume that they're going to be prejudiced one way or the other. So I really think it's a good idea.
All right, but I know from experience, and Don, and I thought you did from experience as well, that as soon as a lot of people don't know what other people are making in town, okay, for one reason or another. You're not interested, you don't publicize it, this and that. As soon as people start talking about, well, did you know that, the transportation people are making $20 an hour? Really? Well, I'm only making, the building inspector's only making $19 an hour. It becomes a discussion point in a small town. You see how quickly things happen in a small town, where people start talking to each other. I didn't know so-and-so was making this much money an hour. I didn't know that so-and-so was making this an hour. They're much better than them. They do a better job than they do. They help me out. We should pay more. So what I'm saying is I'm concerned that it opens a can of worms, when when in a small town, you start talking about other people's salaries, because
What
people are
happened to
people, they're gonna.
transparency? What happened to transparency?
So, it's
It's
not a question of
public,
transparency.
what everybody gets paid, public employees,
I
is
understand.
public information, the public is entitled to it, everybody's entitled to it.
I'm not saying that they're not, but what I'm saying is,
So let transparency work.
see, I don't think that, so this is not a discussion of transparency, Tom. This is a question of, you're talking about other people's wages in a small town. And we've seen it work, it has worked, it has happened, because when we first hired you weren't on the board then. When we first hired the transfer station people, we needed, I think we were offering like $18 an hour. And then, word got out that we wanted to pay $18 an hour, and then another department, which should remain nameless, said, wait a minute, that you wanna pay them more than us? That's not, they handle garbage, we do something else. And so it became a thing. And it seems to be human nature when you start talking about people's salaries, everybody wants to compare it to whether they, everybody's got a different view on how people are, on what people are doing here in Monterey. So I personally don't think it's a good idea to, for it to join the other topics on the community boards and various things where people are starting to talk about other people's salaries. I don't think it's a positive thing. And in light of the fact that we are actually going to be getting professional human resource help, I would hold off to see for that, and I personally wouldn't recommend it. Can we move on? Feel free to add it to the agenda if you'd like to again. But can we move on so we can finish things? Yeah. Review mail and correspondence. Right. Review mail and correspondence be sent. And actually, this concerns you, Don.
If I can comment on it briefly, it's an important subject in my view for the board to consider, but I think it's the kind of issue which generally this board has considered in executive sessions rather than in open public sessions, so that if you decide to pursue it, I think it should be done in an executive session.
Okay. And
I have a few problems, which is just that sometimes we put town employees and groups and this and that on the agenda without inviting them to the meeting, whether it's gonna be an open meeting or executive session. I just feel that we could be better about formally inviting people and or asking for their side of the story before discussing them. And so I would feel uncomfortable on that basis of discussing people without having them attend or inviting them to attend the meeting and sharing their side of the story. But I also, not even to speak to this specific case, but I have a different understanding of resumes than Don, I guess, because whenever I've dealt with resumes, my own resume or someone else's resume, I never assumed that it was supposed to list everything that you have ever done. And I've actually been explicitly told by people who coach me writing resumes that it shouldn't list everything that you've ever done. So I don't think that this is an issue worth taking up in my view, because it just doesn't seem to me to be the common understanding. If there was an understanding that this document that you're submitting lists all of X, Y, and Z, and you don't include X, Y, and Z, then that'd be one thing, but it was never my understanding that resumes list every place that you've ever worked. And then I just don't feel comfortable putting an employee on the agenda to discuss them and then not inviting them to the meeting or asking for a response before,
So
you know.
I'm personally not comfortable discussing this at all, given, current investigation. Not that this has a direct relation to that, but I think it has a tangential relation to it. So we put it on the agenda as a courtesy to you, Don, because, but I would actually ask the board that, that we don't discuss it and don't attach it on the, or that we sequester it, at least, at a minimum, we sequester it until after the
Yeah, it's a
investigation.
public record.
And then the other question that I had that you kind of brought up, you said that I was wondering, how it was put on the agenda because there are no initials on this agenda. So I'm left wondering,
So I reached out to Don and asked if he was, and hoping, what did I say, Don, if you were asking for this to be placed on the agenda, and you said yes, under, review of mail and correspondence. So that's how it got put on the agenda.
I was just wondering, because when I read the selectmen's handbook, I was previously of the understanding that every time someone wrote to the select board, we had to deal with it in a meeting. And then I read the selectmen's handbook, and it said you don't have to necessarily take up every correspondence, and we certainly don't. We get written to a lot, and only a fraction of that makes it on the agenda. And I would think it would be because one of the board members thinks that it's worthwhile to put it on the agenda. That's my understanding.
So we used to keep all the correspondence in the file in there, and you guys would all initial it when you read it. And then recently, you guys have sporadically chosen what you want to put on there.
So, and that's how the selectmen's handbook lays it out. It says, someone writes an email to Steve, Justin, John, we can choose to not respond to it. If you respond to it individually, that's clearly not a response from the board, but maybe it's not something that warrants a response from the board. But if any member deems that it's something worthy of taking up as a board, then we can individually place it on the agenda. That's my understanding. And so is it sporadic? It is not given that if you write the select board, it will be put on the agenda, but it's not sporadic in the sense that it's on the agenda because a select board member deems it worthy of being on.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
So that is my understanding of how things should work. And like I said, I was confused for some time, and anytime someone wrote a little note, I was making sure on the agenda. But yeah, and like I said, my other concern, so your concern is investigation, I share that concern. My other concern is just putting people on the agenda and not giving them a heads up and a formal invite and a chance to respond. So I would agree that we shouldn't discuss it.
I agree with that.
Okay, well, thank you. All right, let's, you wanna do a little bit on the budget?
But,
What?
so,
There's some,
I think I'll spare myself having this weekend.
too long. So just to go through some of the points that were made at the joint meeting yesterday, and just let me know if this is something that you were, because I wasn't clear, we didn't take any votes at that meeting, so, and obviously, we can always go back and revisit these points, but I just wanted to make it clear. So in item number 122, grant writing wages, $5,000 is going to be the number.
Mhm.
You just let me know if there's anything that you disagree with or you want to talk about. Item number 120, the administrative assistant salary, we're considering, keeping that number as a part-time position with no benefits.
Mhm.
Number 155, computer software and supplies will be renamed IT expenses, and that number will be 4,000. Item number 160, the first one, town clerk wages, it's my understanding that currently, we're level funding that line specifically. Item number 160, town clerk staff, that there is right now a discussion, there's trying to determine it, what that is, what can be spent from that line. I left with the understanding that was also, gonna remain the same, but I was a little confused.
Yeah,
What was your understanding?
my understanding was that Michelle wanted to raise the rate and John wanted to allow for multiple employees, and so I don't know that there was any general consensus.
Okay.
Right, is that accurate?
Yeah, it seemed like they didn't vote on it, it seemed like a conflicting, thing. I mean, my personal recommendation would also be to level fund it until we get the information necessary to raise it. But we can just put it on the hold, if we like. The town clerk expenses were fine, the election was fine. All right, so, item number 210, the change of format with utilizing 2 full-time officers and no sergeant. While I would say that we should approve the request from the current chief. This is not to do with who's gonna be the chief or not, that's another matter, we're just talking about the money portion of it. And the reason being, because of the change of policy, policing policy. I understand that would necessitate an increase, because we'd have to be paying for one more, person health insurance, but,
The one thing that came up last night that I was interested in, did we already have it for 2024?
Did I project it out? No, but I will.
Okay,
I didn't realize that they wanted it out 2 years.
yeah, and I didn't even realize.
You're gonna drop the half year salary of the, right, cause you lose the
I know what they're asking. I will do it out what it'll cost the following year. Of course, it'd be an estimate because we won't know what raises and stuff will be.
But I thought that was just an interesting point, because there's a lot going on this year with the halfway with one format and halfway with another.
Right.
So,
which is always gonna be, that's the challenge with budgeting from, July to June. We're always gonna be stuck in that position, because so when you wanna change how something is done.
but the only other question I had is, out of that 52,954 for part-time officers, how much of that is paying them to work shifts in Monterey, and is some of it's for bridge training, right? Paying them to do bridge training,
I thought that,
if I'm not mistaken.
It covers training, the one shift a week, covering any sick, vacation, personal time off, and when the chief and the full-time officers have to go to training, so.
So are we, but what, my question is does that number include, and are we paying for officers to attend bridge training?
Yes.
And so, would it be possible to know how that number was come up with? Because, one question I have, and it got raised briefly, I believe, was, are we going, and it sounded like we are, or the plan was to send all 5 officers, or offer them all to pay for them to go to bridge training. And I just wanna know what kind of a cost that, yields to the town.
You read that?
That makes a lot of sense. Oh, yeah, wow, I'm wondering the tree warden if we can.
Yeah, it's the $6,300 number, but that breaks out everything.
But also the tree warden, how they come up with the $3,000?
For, what line are you on?
For, wasn't discussed, but I had written a note, 294, tree warden's expenses. I,
46,000?
yeah.
Right, you guys had agreed, his initial budget meeting in fiscal year 20, you guys agreed to increase his expenses by $15,000 over the next 5 years, so it's in $3,000 increments.
Oh, so that's, okay. That makes sense.
This may be something though that you guys might be able to play with it's my understanding the current tree warden may not be running again. So who knows if the next tree warden is going to have the same vision for the town.
I guess that'd be
Well,
tough, cause we have to approve, and town meeting has to approve the budget before knowing who the tree warden is.
yeah.
So we kinda probably just wanna go with,
Well, I mean, you could level fund it if you want. We'll
was
know
just-
this month if the
I was
current
actually
tree
just,
warden's
I was
gonna
actually
run or
just
not.
thinking about trimming $1,000 off of it, making $45,000. I'm just trying to figure out ways to, to scratch, part of this also is finding some ways to scratch back some funds, so that you can, pay for other things that are important. And obviously you're making educated guesses. That's what this is. If anybody tells you, because I remember hearing a speech last night about that there's concrete formulas for budgeting. The perfect world, actually even in the perfect world, there really isn't. You do the best you can. You try to make assumptions. The more knowledge you know of the town, the more idea you find, and yes, and here and there you do split the difference on things, because if you could pull $1,000 here or $500 here, that's perfectly fine. You should talk to I would want to talk to the tree warden and say, listen, what do you think about this, or highway or whatever. But the idea that you can go back into time and say, well, we spent this amount of money, 5 years ago or 20 years ago or 15 years ago, and so therefore we have to spend this amount of money now. It doesn't work that way. Everything is different. Everything changes from year to year, especially in the last 2 years with COVID. If anybody tries to do it, if anybody tells you they can do an analysis of what happened in this town for the last 2 years and try to project those 2 years forward, I'd say they're standing on sand, because it was a completely different ball game, and it might be next year as well. So when I look at things like, so I kind of go through it here, and I just circle things and put little question marks and just want to find out if I can find, and also one other thing I should say while I have the
floor here.
The term over budgeting is a bit of a false flag. If you budget something, you cannot base, what, you never know what you're gonna pay for things. You just don't. And we try to do as best as we can. And a lot of the analysis is very good, but the idea that, but sometimes you actually are, I mean, you don't wanna be cut short. So it's sometimes, so there's, if anybody asks me, or anybody says, well, you're over budgeting, my first reaction to them is, okay, tell me what department it is. Which department is over budgeted? And then it's good to have that discussion of that particular department. So if it's highway, let's talk about highway. If it's, but just a blanket statement, you guys are, just like, well, what I used to hear when I was first on the select board is, you guys are fast and loose, run, you guys just are spending like crazy. You're spending like drunken sailors. They used to tell me all the time. You guys spend, really? Come and tell me what you think is being misspent. We'll have a discussion about it. But just a blanket statement is not helpful. So I would ask, Melissa, I mean, would it make sense to ask tree warden if he could, if he needs the full 46, or could
Yep.
could deal with $1,000 to $1,000. Not picking on the tree warden, I find, I just go through the budget the way I do it. Doesn't mean it's the right way. The way I go through the budget is I look at what we paid in the past and what the request is now. Things that are going up dramatically, percentage-wise, certainly more than 5%. I put a circle around it, and I want to know, why. Usually the explanation is proper. But sometimes it's like, well, I don't know, I just figured I'd add X number of dollars on it. By the way, there's also people that ask, so in the past, there have been departments, I don't think they're doing it that much anymore, but every once in a while, in the town of Monterey, departments have been known to ask for more than they need so that you could push them back to a certain level. That's I don't think it happens, it really doesn't seem to happen that much anymore, but that used to be the case. But you always want to be on the lookout for that, and there's no formula with that. You have to sort of see what's going on. So when I went through it rapidly, I actually didn't see anything that was completely out of the, nothing else really jumped out at me.
So we'll talk about the library loan at some point.
Right, so library loan, we're gonna get this information this week.
Did anybody, you were in the room, was it 104,020 that
It was-
she asked for? Because I couldn't hear
It
her.
was 100,000 plus interest,
Right.
which was 4,000 something.
Okay, you didn't hear the rest of it either then?
No, I mean, I did hear it, but I don't have it written down.
I do believe that, I would like to get guidance on if we should, I think this might be the time to see if you can convert that into one loan instead of doing state F notes, because interest rates are going to start to rise. We do have Monterey, I don't know if you know this or not, but, for many years, first of all, Monterey used to audit only every 3 years. Most of these towns did, which is a bad idea, but they did it because it was cheap. Then Monterey and other towns, we start to audit every year. And we, and because of that, and because of our push towards try to get professional people in the accounting, department and treasury, we've actually, this is our 3rd or 4th year with a totally good audit, a clean audit. Which is, if you ask around or you talk to other people in other towns, they don't have. So, that gives us the ability to borrow, and, a better ability to borrow. So I would like some guidance from Community Bank. I think we want to see what we can do so that we can come up with a number for library loans. People know it, so the board in the future can rely on this payment schedule.
Because the problem was at first that we weren't able to get a loan, right, because we didn't have the necessary audits.
Well, our audit was, when we first started to discuss it, we'd only been like clean for 1 year. You know, when it clean doesn't mean we were dirty, it means that, we're still missing things. It took a little while to kind of, to try to make everything nice and clean. And that's one of the best things that this select board ever did, was to decide to do yearly audits. Because we really, moderate financially, and actually in all aspects, but we are as solid as a rock, and that's one good thing. So now we can bond. We can bond if we wanted to, because we have a good audit. Nothing else really, jumped out at me. Were you okay with, I guess, I was about to ask you a question about community center lighting. I don't know if you want to. Yeah.
Community center lighting should have, I do not foresee that having an impact on my financial status.
Okay.
Or that of family members.
Okay, so.
So I feel that ethically I am okay to discuss community center lighting.
Okay, so are you comfortable with the idea that the RFP will go out, and should the RFP for the community center lighting be less than the requested amount, that amount would be amended on the floor?
Yes, or even just tabled, if we don't need any money, I think it's a good contingency plan, depending on what proposals come back, to have a number on there. Because I've been to the community center at night, especially before the temporary lighting was up, and it's like, I walk around my yard at night with no light, but that it's a different level of dark there. And so I think it's an important thing, and, depending on how the proposals come back, maybe it's not necessary, but I think it's good to leave in as an article.
So I think anytime, anytime you have the public and they're gonna be using it at night, when you have to have the right amount of lighting. I have no problem with it. However, technically, that's over budgeting.
Yeah.
So as you can see, sometimes over budgeting is necessary. However, we have assurances that we will modify it on the floor if need be, as any of these items can be modified on the floor. If somebody feels that the certain department is getting too much for some reason, they're free to put a hold on it and have a discussion at town meeting. The only other thing was a discussion about stabilization. Now, personally, I am open to adding the additional $30,000 into from free cash, since this is money that's already been taxed. It's on additional funds that you're actually getting from the taxpayer. Any money that we can put in stabilization, it's obviously going to be used. So your recommendation yesterday, I don't have I don't have a problem with it. Again, I don't feel strongly in this particular case, zero is okay, $15,000 okay, $30,000 is okay. So if you feel strongly about it, we could, as a board, we can make our recommendation. It's certainly not, anything that, and again, we also can see how it works out in the total budget after COLA is decided, and then decide. But I just want to let you know that, that it's always good to sock away more. Again, there's some people that think we should have $1 million, some people think we should have zero. So, I like, staying in the $500,000 range. I don't like being it just at 500,000, because then if you have to use it, then you drop it down, and next year you want to, you're going to try to raise money. If we do have this error that gave us some free cash, that, it's not a bad idea that you take some of it and put it away. You do want to use the majority of it to lower the tax rate. But the numbers that were being floated around yesterday, I didn't really understand how you would get there, from what's in the coffers. But perhaps, Melissa, after you put it all in, we'll know.
It works.
It works.
What's that?
The changes, I just need to confirm one more thing before I send it all around to everybody, that
Oh, okay.
the changes work.
So, let's look. Is there anything else you have to discuss on this, or we'll?
No, I think that's good, and then we're meeting, what, next Wednesday at 5? Next Wednesday at 5. Would it make sense to make our select board meeting half an hour later or something to allow for more joint meeting? I don't know, I'm not trying to.
No, wait. So
I was just
what they want to do, you mean next, Wednesday, right?
Next Wednesday, I think the plan is to have a joint meeting at 5 PM and a select board meeting at 6 PM. If I'm not mistaken.
Okay. You shouldn't have many items other than COLA left to talk about.
Yeah, I would think that the
COLA,
joint
and if
meeting-
the clerk answers the questions, because then you discuss all that, and then the only things left to discuss should be, scheduling anybody else that needs to come actually sit in front of you guys.
I thought, didn't we agree that Jim was
Oh,
coming?
Jim is coming at 5,
Jim's
yes.
coming.
Wanted to do it later or earlier?
Never mind. I think, and then depending on what we hear from like Garfield Working Group as well.
I mean, you guys could discuss COLA today and come up with your recommendation, which we could give to the finance committee to discuss at their Tuesday meeting, and then they can discuss it not in a joint meeting and see if you both come to the same consensus.
Yeah.
All these discussions don't need to be joint.
Well, look, I've got no problem with that. Look, I think I propose 4%. The Monterey's paid 2% every single year, at least in the last 20 years, until last year where we gave 3.5%, with the recognition of the challenges that people were facing, and that was even before inflation. I think the challenges, even though this is really gonna impact people hopefully after the pandemic is over, an additional 0.5% is, from what we did last year, I think is fair and reasonable. It splits the difference between, going back to the 2%, and or going to something that is really gonna have a negative impact on taxpayers. It's my understanding that, it's not, there are other, groups of employees out there that are allowed to collectively bargain and have, it seems like 4% 3% is generally what's been in the discussion. It, you know, and,
I heard New Marlboro's giving 7,
what? Really?
because they have a new, union over there.
Well, they have it, so,
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you, Steve. I was thinking, 3.5 to 4%, is a good middle ground. And tries to work for everybody involved, and a compromise number kind of, but. That's where my head was at, is 3.5 to 4%.
you'll make a recommendation at 3.75? Or does the, or are you okay with 4%?
I think, I think given the rate of inflation, 4% is probably reasonable.
So even though this discussion sounds arbitrary, it's not. But this is where this is a combination of, trying to do the best you can, trying to see what other people are doing, it's not an exact, again, don't let anybody tell you it's exact science. It is not exact science, okay? If you wanted to wed it to inflation, then yeah, 7%, you give it, but you whack out the taxpayers, and you'd end up giving the money after, hopefully, inflation subsides.
Yeah.
So you wouldn't be able to do what you wanna do when you wanna do it. So that's why formulas sometimes don't really work as well as you think. So we're basically splitting the difference on this. We're trying to give people a little bit more help with the recognition that, and with the understanding that should the economy get better, inflation goes down, that you may end up stepping back the following year. It can be hard to step back, but at least maybe you'll be in a position back to 3.5 or back to 3, or something like that. But I think it's fair and reasonable, and I think, okay, so
Yeah.
that would be our recommendation,
4%.
so if I make a motion that the Monterey Select Board propose a 4%, cost of living increase, to the employees of Monterey.
I'll second.
Well, yes?
Yes.
Good. Good. And then Melissa can plug in the numbers, and then we can really look at and see what's going on, what the impact is. All right, so, any questions or comments from the public, because we're gonna. Now, Mr. Upton, any comments from you? No?
It's actually Emily Johnson.
Yeah, I know. Emily, Mr. Upton?
One question that I had was just about an email today about the dump truck certification. And I remember, was that not what was certified? The dump truck warrant thing, is that different than what
Oh, the
Terry
clerks,
came in.
yeah, so.
certified?
Oh, yeah, it's something she needed to do online after town meeting, but it's necessary to finish the banknotes.
Okay, but that's not what was
It's not what was in the
certified
packet,
here.
no.
Okay, I was just curious, cause I thought,
No, I double checked with the treasurer and said that's not something that was in the packet, right? And she said, no, it was something that you do online right after town meeting.
After town meetings?
so it's a
So I
form,
don't understand why was there requested it?
Because she's certifying I guess something to do with the vote for the borrowing but I can show you the,
No,
but what was the document that got certified and handed to Steve?
that was a certification of the vote.
Of the
This
vote,
is,
yeah.
let me pull up the email and I'll print it off.
No, I saw the email, I was just curious about, I thought that was the certification of the vote.
You too.
There's two. So the other part, I'm assuming, and don't quote me on this, is part of the, maybe the end of year reporting that has to do with certifying the votes at town meeting, and it would impact any future borrowing.
Okay.
And that particular form, I guess, has not been filled out.
But is the accountant aware of the other certification of the vote?
The treasurer?
The
Yes.
treasurer, sorry.
This is the only thing missing.
Okay. And that certification that we received last week isn't sufficient?
No.
Oh. I was just.
Yep.
The other question I have about executive session is, if, this got brought up once before, but if one of the sets of minutes we're ready to approve and or even disseminate to the public, do we need to go into executive session to discuss it?
Oh, so you're talking about the ones,
That we were going, that
right,
it's written on the agenda to discuss entering
Yeah,
executive
that's-
session. Because also when we enter executive session, then we have to get another set of executive session minutes.
I know,
So I'm trying to end that cycle
I
somehow.
know, this is like a mirror looking into a mirror looking into a mirror.
So these would be the one of 223 then.
Mhm.
Right, do you see, let's see, do I see anything? Oh, well. I don't know if. So there's a thing.
If you think we need to enter executive session, then let's do it, but if we can approve.
The other way to end the cycle, Justin, is when we know we're finally gonna get to the last one, I will do the minutes right as we speak, and you can approve the ones with that.
Gotcha.
So, yeah, so
If you
part
want,
of the executive session minutes may include article number 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation. If in an open meeting, it may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body. And so the chair so declares. May also apply to 9 and meet with a mediator, not really. That's not mediator, when you're discussing potential litigation, it may have to be an executive session. And as part of that, little bits. Allude to that. Why don't we just hold off and then send it to council and get their opinion on it, if that's the case. So, so I move that the select board move into executive session. Can you continue review and consider approval of the following sets of executive session minutes, 10:04 and 2:23? As a motion, and then I will do a roll call.
and we will, return to open session after the executive session. Otherwise, we should do the.
I was gonna say, you should do this letter first.
Yeah. Unless we thought that the letter was gonna be different depending on the results of executive session.
Which
Which
doesn't
sounds
sound that way.
So
So
we can't respond to open meeting law complaints in executive session. So maybe we should do that first.
look, so.
Or we should return to open meeting.
Here's the thing, does this have to be answered, does this letter?
Yes.
think,
Well,
yeah.
this letter's gonna basically stay the same,
So then just approve it and sign it and go into executive session. There's nothing, even if you do, there's nothing that's dramatically gonna change in this letter.
that's true, because even if something changes in the executive session, it's still.
Make a motion to approve the letter as drafted.
So is it easy to change and print out, or no?
What, you need to change something right now?
I would.
Okay, give me just 2 seconds.
When we think about.
Alright, what do you wanna change?
All I was gonna add is, we are convening again today in executive session to come to a consensus on those minutes. If we are not able to approve minutes for the executive session of 10/4/21, we are still trying to come to a consensus, and each member has a set of draft minutes or something along those lines.
Why not say if we cannot come to a consensus, the select board is committed to continuing work to come to a consensus on the minutes, just.
Yeah.
Why don't, in that, why don't you, because that's true, that's, we are committed to attempt to come to a consensus.
And actually, I was able to get off the opinion from Attorney Riley that I got on the matter, so.
Actually, I really like it when you get on the, I think it'd be great if you could be on the line during this executive session. Can we do that? We do that, right?
Right now?
You see, you get him on the phone during the executive session. Not now, but.
Maybe in the future.
Yeah, I was gonna say, he barely responds to an email right away.
Well, I'm saying you can get lucky. I mean, we talked about Steve Snyder and he suddenly appeared, so apparently we're on a bit of a roll here.
Should we call the office, the cell, or the fax?
Don't call facts. Call cell number.
Wait till we.
No,
decide.
I think if we wanna invite the attorneys, we should do it in advance.
Well,
It's-
but I would, just for expediency's sake, because there's something, anyway. Yeah, all right, let's wait till we're in executive session.
So did we, oh, we're doing this first, okay.
We're gonna do this first, we're not voting on anything, we're not gonna do anything else. On another related topic, do we have any updates from Chapin about the store?
I only added the very last sentence in the last paragraph.
Let me look at it before you comment.
Yeah. Notice how all the dates that I put in this format, except for February 16, 2022, was written out.
Oh, okay.
That I put in there, that I did. I don't know what I was thinking.
Good, that works for me, so I move that
Can we sign it?
we sign and approve this letter dated March 2nd, 2022.
Yeah, second.
Yes.
Yes, and this needs to go to who, John, and the
I'll
state?
send it to John and the state. Now you need to go into executive session.
So I make a motion that we go into executive session.
Second, for the purpose of.
Sorry, for the, well, I meant to before, but I want to, for the purpose of agenda item number 11, to discuss during the executive session to continue review and consider approval of the following sets of executive session minutes, 10:4 and 2:23.
Oh, second, that motion.
Okay, I vote yes.
and yes.
Okay, and then the roll call vote, Stephen, Vice Chair, votes to go into executive session. Oh, and we will not be returning to public session afterwards.
And Justin Maycock vote yes, and here to go to executive session.
Okay.
And not return.
Okay, good.
Take a bite of Mr. Upton.